Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of the Valley View. And this week we're going to have several guests all talking about KMUZ, the local community radio station. To my far right we have David Duncan, and then Tim Patterson and Melanie Zimmer. And welcome to the show, Jeff.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And maybe you could talk a little bit about the history of KMUZ, how it got started, and where it is now, and where you want it to go.
How far back do you want to go?
Yeah.
Well, how did it get started?
Boy, you go back about 5 to 6 years when Karen Holman, who was a chemistry professor at Willamette University, had been in town for a while and said, you know, there's no station here. There's no community station. So she looked into it and found that at some point a license application window came open from the FCC, and there were 3 groups that applied. I'm giving you the really short version.
Oh, okay, good.
And they were one of the 3, and they got the award for the license. And at that point, the clock started ticking. They had 3 years to get on the air. And I came in about a year later when I heard about it at a radio rally, and I think 2010 maybe. And we made it really by the skin of our teeth. But we were on December 17th, 2011 for good. There was some testing before that. Yes. There's a lot of miracles in the fact that we're even on the air.
Right. Yeah, we call ourselves a little station that could.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, that was always one of my favorite stories when I was a kid. I made my mom read that story many times. and so you got on December 17th,
2011.
2011, and you had live programming and
a little ceremony where they clicked the laptop that turned on the antenna link.
And I think the first song we played was Rock and Roll Radio by the Ramones.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yeah.
And so you have a kind of diversity of shows, or themes, or how does that work?
A lot of diversity, Melanie.
Yeah.
You can
Well, I'd like
address
to
that.
talk about the public affairs piece,
Okay.
because what got me interested in the community radio station was having more local public affairs on the air. So the Programming Review Committee has just recently set, and we're able to install a very a window of public affairs programming so that you can turn on the radio anytime between Monday through Friday, between noon and 2, and you'll get some sort of local public affairs programming. So that's fairly new, although we've been doing some public affairs throughout. One of my favorite shows is, because I coordinate it, it's called The Forum. And so what we do is we go out and record important events and presentations and forums that happen in the community, like Salem City Club, for instance. You can, if you've missed Salem City Club, and they have a lot of really good speakers, if you miss it, you can count on hearing it sometime later that month on KMUZ Radio. So there's the forum, and that is a broadcast of things that happen in the community. We go out and record it. But then there are other shows that are covering all kinds of different issues. Like we have Pause for Thought, which Terry Ellen talks about pet care. We have Special Needs, Special Parents, where people who have children with special needs can tune in and hear Deanne Bass talking about different resources in the community. She has really fabulous interviews, and it will even include somebody who's studying the brain, for instance. Boy, now I'm drawing a blank, but there's many.
Well,
so
David hosts
all right, there you go.
a tech show.
So I do
you
a
co-host
tech
another
show,
show.
And actually, Northwest Tech Show started here at CCTV because I was following in the footsteps of some of the video podcasts I'd been a big fan of, but that was very hard to produce on a weekly or even monthly basis. So when I heard about the station, I thought, well, that would be an ideal way to come up with regular online, regular fresh content. Is just, the pressure of sitting down on a mic and, okay, start doing your topics.
You got an hour.
You got an hour, and it was, when you don't have the visual component, it simplifies things a great deal. You can do things that's very current. And the show that just happened to follow mine was called New Health Radio on health topics, and he was reading scholarly research journal articles for a great deal and then explaining what they meant. And we had him on as a guest on my show, my former co-host and I, and he was really great. He had a really great tech background. And I was like, why don't we, when my co-host left, why don't we, you come in early and I'll stay late and we'll be each other's co-hosts? Because when you have two people on a talk show, makes a
Yeah,
world
it's more
of
fun.
difference.
You
It
guys
makes a
are,
world of
yeah,
difference, yeah.
Buddy system radio, I was calling it.
yeah, and it's fun. It's like you guys have a conversation. It sounds like you're having fun. It sounds like I'm at a coffee shop, just like eavesdropping on a couple of guys having some real cool conversations. So I like your shows.
And
Yeah.
we have a fascinating show Mondays for half an hour at noon. Lee Coyne hosts a program called Aging Without Raging.
Yeah. Yes.
And
you
Lee,
have
I've
to-
known Lee for a long time, and he's a Brooklyn guy and a great writer. He's written a lot, and he's new to radio, so this is new for him. He's had to learn some of the nuts and bolts. We're still getting him up to speed on some of the nuts and bolts, but he does a great program. Brings in
Yeah.
people to interview,
Connects
and
with
it's
people.
very
Yeah.
fascinating material. So a lot of it, just think about what programming we have on that's very local oriented that
Yes.
no one else has, and that's what we really
Yeah.
kind of stake our claim is that we're doing something nobody else in the community is doing.
And there's no intermediary that's filtering that, like a commercial entity, like, oh, you're not getting a voice with other people in Salem unless we're selling some soap out of it or something.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and actually, when I lived in Sacramento, and I had a show there on TV, and one of the reasons for that was because I was connected to a lot of local groups that were constantly trying to get media attention, and when they did get it, it was so warped that you couldn't, there was no message there for them to really, and so like it's helpful to have like a half an hour to talk about local subjects. And it was interesting because quite often, even though there were 3 network stations, 4 actually in the Sacramento area, we quite often were breaking news
Yeah.
because we actually went out and did local stories.
Well, I do. I do want to mention we have a new show that will be coming up early February. It'll be Thursdays from 1 to 1:30, and it's an experimenting collaborating with another media, Salem Weekly. So A.P. Walther, who's the publisher of Salem Weekly, will come on. As a matter of fact, I think. By the way, I think you are hosting
I agreed
that
to be
show.
the host.
Strange
Yes.
Right.
coincidence, yeah.
So what?
So you ask the questions, and AP will be responding to
Well,
stuff.
yeah,
that
and
they've
he's
got
going to be
going.
talking about
Yeah.
local
Salem.
issues.
Yeah.
What's currently going on here in Salem.
Right.
And it's kind of I know that I haven't talked to him yet, but I go out in the public and people are all talking about this footbridge over to Minto
yeah.
Brook.
Right,
And
right.
so I'll be sure to ask him about that subject because I know it's something that's talked around town about.
That in the Civic Center, that's going to
Yes.
be a big issue for
Yes.
Salem. Yeah.
And we also have a debut. I don't know if it's debuted yet, and maybe you can answer that. It's this transgender show.
Yep,
I'm not
it's
really
on
sure.
Tuesdays.
On
Yeah.
Tuesdays, and so this is something
Alternates.
you won't hear on the radio at all, which is about the issues that world goes through. Along with special needs, you never hear anything about that. So I
Oh,
think it's
yeah.
great that KMUZ can bring those types of programs. I mean, the community is bringing this to us. We're not going out and soliciting that. We're just looking for people to do programs, and this is what comes to us from the people that want to. They're passionate about
And the
it.
nice thing about this as a means for the community to talk to itself is that is the goal. It's not something being serving some other master. It's, they're talking about these community issues because that's what the show is for and that's what the station is for.
And I think what's important to note is that early on, our board had a lot of discussions about the politics of the station. Should we be political? If so, which direction should we lean? And it really came down to we don't want to rule anything out. We decided to be apolitical as best we could. Certainly the people that are on the board and a lot of the people that come to the shows, a lot of them lean one direction. Doesn't matter which direction it is, but the fact of the matter is we are not specifically trying to be a left-leaning or right-leaning station. We're trying to open the doors and open the microphone to all points of view that are currently not represented on the air.
Right. Yeah.
That was a very conscious decision on our part.
We represent the community, not just one aspect of it. And so that's the beauty of a community radio station. Is it's the community. We own it. Our community owns the station through a nonprofit organization.
For their benefit, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's also placed, because I tune in, and I did hear David's last show when he was talking about the NSA, which, is very current. But also there's a wide variety of music
Right.
that goes on
Yeah,
that
we
you're
were
not
talking
going
about
to hear
music,
other
yes.
places.
We
Yes.
should talk about the music.
Yeah.
That's not. I mean, I love the music. I listen to it, but Tim, you have a music
Well,
show.
I came from a music radio background. I spent 25 years in commercial radio, and everything classic rock, country, top 40 back when it was called top 40. Back when you had the little rock jocks, that's what I started out as. But I've always wanted to do a reggae show. Love reggae, and so I ended up. That was why I raised my hand when that radio rally came around. I thought, well, I'll just sign up and do a radio show when they finally get it on the air. You know?
When they get it on the air.
It didn't quite work
There's
out
no
that way
they.
They will be
because
very industrious.
I had to be one of they, and so I became one of them, and
now you're one of
now
us.
I'm one of us. And all the work that came about, but yes, I got my reggae show. I'm doing that Mondays from 5 to 8. I spend 3 hours playing reggae from the 60s and 70s, and
And about 15 hours a week at the station doing other things.
Yes, and so I've done that since the beginning. So that's been over 2 years. And I also do a show. It's a pre-recorded show. It's an hour show about stand-up comedy. A lot of historical stuff. Lenny Bruce, George Carlin, Bob Newhart, Bill Cosby, along with novelty records. Weird Al Yankovic, and you go back to stuff from the 40s, 50s, and the 60s. Boogie Woogie Bugle Boys, stuff like that will show up. Kind of novelty, cutesy pie records. And
Spike Jones.
Spike Jones. I've had Spike Jones on. Yeah. Yeah, so there's a lot of that airs Friday morning from 9 to 10. So that's pre-recorded mainly because I want to make sure what I'm playing is vetted. There's a lot of material like George Carlin.
Oh, or Lenny Bruce.
Well, actually, I haven't found any profanity in Lenny Bruce at all. His topics are really kind of strange at times, and they can be ethnic, political. They can be a lot of different things. But he doesn't use profanity. This is like late 50s, early 60s. So, so as a historical standpoint, I really like listening to this old stuff. I grew up on Cosby, as a lot of us from this generation did, and before he ever became a TV star. So.
It's interesting you mentioned about reggae, and I had never listened to reggae until I went to upstate New York for a seminar, and the only station I could get in this part of upstate New York was a local community station, and I turned on when they were doing reggae. And I'd never heard it before, and I heard Bob Marley and some other folks, and as soon as I got home out of that seminar, I went out to the record store and got Bob Marley. So, I mean, you're exposing people to music maybe they haven't heard before.
Right.
And that is something that, like if you always listen to Top 40, you're going to have kind of a limited view of the music world.
Right. And I mean that's just a start for what we have. I mean, we've got late Friday nights, we've got Heavy Metal Day of Doom show, which I always like to, it's not my cup of tea, but boy, people that like that, I'm sure find a lot to like. And Zydeco on Tuesday night, we've got American Roots, we've got country,
and a lot of local
Western swing, and there's a number of programmers that do strictly local music. And,
like local roots, like you mentioned.
And even Pete, who does jazz on Wednesdays, has a really local flavor to his jazz show, which is I think Monday or Wednesdays 5 to 7. So there's a lot of variety in our programming.
Yeah, and there's kind of what is it? Mojo.
Yeah, world music.
So she does a lot of world music,
Yeah, she does a great job of telling you about. That's the one thing that I want to let listeners know about our music. It's like, you can get your music off iPods, off your cell phone, all kinds of ways. But if you're listening to music on KMUZ, you're getting a perspective from a particular individual sharing their knowledge, the history of the music.
Their passion for it.
So it's not as sterile as listening to an iPod. That's what I like about listening to the radio.
Or even listening to other radio stations, which we obviously compete with as well, along with all the other platforms. But you have to keep in mind that these programmers come to do one show a week, and they do 2 hours, generally speaking.
Right.
And so that's their only chance. And so they spend a lot of time preparing for that. And they have a playlist. I mean, you listen to DJ Sloan on Fridays from noon to 2 with the Delicious Dish, and she puts a lot of effort in it. Everyone does.
Everyone does.
And passion is the word that I keep using when I describe what these programmers do. They bring a passion for that type of music to their show.
Yeah, I think KMUZ is really a cultural hub too, because a lot of our DJs play live musicians on the air, like Mashup with Mark on Friday afternoons often has live musicians, people who are coming through town. It gives them a venue, another venue to showcase their music. And he showcases a lot of local people too. So
local roots is the same way.
It's a real community resource.
And spinning back in time, I've heard them have a bunch of musicians in there.
Yeah.
It's kind of crowded sometimes.
Yeah, they have a lot of people on the
Russian Rock Radio actually brought in musicians from Russia one time.
Yeah, that's right.
As part of a tour.
Yep.
Yeah.
In fact, our host, Ivana Rakyu, by the way, has been lobbying, and the PRC finally said, okay, well, that's the program review committee. Said she says, I have people in Russia that want to listen to the show, and when I do it live on Sunday at 6, I think it is, they can't listen to it. It's like 4 in the morning there. And so we replay that, I think, on a Monday morning or something.
Or Thursday, 5 a.m.
5 a.m. So it's 5 a.m. here, which is late in the afternoon over there.
So you're wondering why we have this weird, it's like it's one show at 5 a.m.
Yeah,
It's like, Russia, you know.
So we're playing for a Russian audience
Yeah,
as well
that's right.
in Moscow.
Well, I hope they call during pledge drive and let us know they support
give us a few
us.
rubles.
Yeah, a few rubles.
We'll have to make sure we emphasize the mail-in aspect.
Oh, there. Good point. Good point.
And I guess we should mention that there is a pledge.
Well, I would like to address that. We are a community radio station, so we don't do advertising. We don't give it any government funds. I just figured this out today because we're going into pledge drive, so it's good for people to know. But we are at this point 85% listener supported. About 13% we get through underwriting. So there are businesses who can say, hey, I want to show my support for the community, so I'm going to have my name announced on the air, and they pay a little bit of money for that. So underwriting and listener support is how we make our money.
Yeah.
And we have no staff. We're doing this. We have 100 volunteers, 60 programs. We need about $3,000 a month, even in spite of the fact we have no staff. So we're starting our pledge drive, I think, Saturday
the 1st.
The 1st.
Yeah.
Goes for 7 days.
Yep.
Yeah, the 3 prongs of support for a community station are donors, which come from on-air listeners for the most part, underwriting, and then grants. And for a new entity such as us, grants are a little harder to come by, and also you have to spend a lot of time getting them, and that's hard to find those people to volunteer to do that have that specialization. It's easier to go on the air and ask for money, which happens, and that keeps increasing. We get more people doing that every time. But we've also got to do underwriting, and that's one of those areas where we have a little bit, and we could do more, and we're working to expand that as well. I'd love to have like a third come from each one of those 3 legs.
That's our goal.
And that's where we'll eventually get, and we'll also at some point, I'm hoping that within the next year or so we can fund a full-time or 2 full-time positions at the station to be administrative, that sort of thing, to make it operate a little better.
And like, I know that from discussion there's been new equipment brought in so that it sounds, but it wasn't new equipment, it was used equipment.
There was some used equipment donated.
And
Yeah.
talk about the
And we-
studio, the new studio.
And we didn't really want to think like, we've got money coming out our ears and we're just buying new stuff. It's like, no, we're like, working the back alleys.
Yeah.
And it's like, we'll trade you this and you'll get this, and then we'll add this element and we'll crack the board open and recondition these, and we'll be okay.
And our computers come from
Free Geek.
Free Geek.
Free Geek.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
most
Giving
of what we got
computers
at
to
the beginning
nonprofits,
was
yeah.
donated. In fact, when we first got started here a couple of years ago, there was 6 stations up in Portland. I have a friend who's an engineer, and they were all conglomerating into one location. They had a lot of equipment that was just going to get tossed or recycled, and so we kind of landed there between them and the recycling bin and brought a lot of it in.
So our new master control
yes.
is a combination of horse trading
Yes.
and having an in-house carpenter. One of our DJs is a carpenter, so he built us that beautiful table. And you look at that thing, it's like, wow, they really spent some money. It's like, no, we did.
No, we didn't.
lot
We had
of-
donated
a lot of
materials. We had lamination on the top donated.
labor.
We stretch it out.
Yeah.
Lots
we
of-
really
lots of
stretch it
labor.
out.
We
Free
squeeze a
labor.
lot out of a dollar. So, but
So
yeah,
the
we
community
have
is getting a lot of bang for their buck.
Oh, yes. And I think it's a
Absolutely.
great resource, and that's what I tell people that are potential underwriters, that you are not only getting some branding on the station with our listeners who really want to support you, but you're getting a chance to support what we consider a valuable resource, which is getting more valuable because we're getting more listeners as time goes on.
And speaking of listeners, I don't think we once let our listeners here know that our frequency is 88.5 FM.
We should do
Turner,
that,
yeah, KMUZ, 88.5 FM.
the Mid-Valley's community radio station.
Right. And people can't, if they can't hear us on the radio, they can of course stream us. Go to our website, kmuz.org.
Or use the free TuneIn radio app
That's right.
on your smartphone or tablet.
Which is
a
a
free
free
download
download.
every hour.
Yes, exactly.
So you don't have to have a radio anymore to listen.
No, if you
You
got a
don't have to,
smartphone.
no. Yeah. And I was in Spain last year, in Barcelona, listening to KMUZ on my earphones walking down the street.
Cool.
Because I had Wi-Fi, or I had access to the internet. Yeah.
Stunned the heck out of the DJ when he called in and said, hey, didn't do the ID at the top of the hour.
Dude, I thought you were in Barcelona, dude. Yeah, so
We thought you were
I'm
on
not watching
vacation.
you.
And we do have listeners all over the world, frankly, because a lot of our DJs have a lot of connections to the world, and they have their friends and family tune in. And sometimes
restaurant.
we can tell that people are tuning in that nobody knows, where is that person
Ooh, why
from?
is that
someone in
over the
Austin,
years, or-
Texas listening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like one of
we
our
can
new
tell.
shows, Hispanidad. That's been person grew up in Mexico. Really, just I'll be practical and do these things, but boy, I wish I could be a radio DJ. And then he comes to us with all that passion for it, and he's just so happy when he
That's
gets on
great.
the air.
Yeah.
He has all this great heritage of music to draw on, and but he makes it accessible to an English-speaking audience.
Yeah.
So that's something
Thursdays,
you're not going to get anywhere
right?
else. It's not like you can go to a Spanish station; you'll just hear it all Spanish. He's
And it's
bridging
it's
that.
Latin American music. It's not just
Right.
Mexican
Not just Mexico.
music.
That's where he's from. But yes,
Right.
it's all Latin American
Yeah.
music and culture.
So again, showcasing part of our community, the Hispanic part of our community, and there's pieces that are missing on the radio station. So I would encourage people to check out our schedule and see where we have holes in content, and see if you can't help us get that filled, so we
Yeah,
can
the,
really
the
represent.
current goal is to fill 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. with 100% live. We're probably 80% there, 80,
Yeah.
85% there. And I think that the spots that we have are harder to fill because the people that come to us with a program need to be able to fit it into that time slot, and they've got a job or something because these people are volunteering for a
Or it's
couple
hard to
hours
get
a
someone
week.
to say, every single week,
Yes.
forever, I will be there Friday night.
1 week at a
Right.
time, we
Yes.
tell them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But we're open to other things like well, if you do a show once a month, and these other people do a show once a month, then collectively
Then we can fill that
keep
slot,
it filled
yeah.
with something that's thematically connected, and yet no one is sacrificing their schedule.
And if somebody is interested in becoming a DJ, they have an idea for a show, how do they go about doing that?
Well, we have a pretty structured process to work through. They would apply online, which is the best way to do it, on our website, kmuz.org. And there's be a DJ, the form you fill out and answer a series of questions about the type of program you want, your availability, your experience, and then once that's in, you sign up for training, which David is in charge of training and orientation, and then you're shadowing a on-air person. And so the program goes through the whole process of the program review committee, which looks at it, decides if we have a program like that or not, how does that work?
Yeah. The one thing we really should hit on is that we're about inclusion. That's the voice of it. So if someone wants to do something kind of shock jockey, that's not the right place for it, because we have to worry about FCC considerations, and we're trying to be very community friendly because we rely completely on its support. So we never want to be in people's face, but we do want to inform them and educate them about each other.
Entertain them, too.
And at every step of the process, someone is helping you. So we never want someone to feel like they're just being shoved off the plank. It's like they're going to get a chance to sit in with DJs before they actually start their show. When they start their show, someone will be there.
Usually you, by the way.
Usually me, but yeah, just and my job on those days is to sit back and not help them, to jump in if they panic, but to let them build confidence that they can do it. So the next week I can be gone and they won't be worried about it.
Yeah, sitting down and to a radio control board the first time is very intimidating. It's like driving a car for the first time. But once you've done it a few times, it gets easier. As time goes on, you go, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. And after a while, it's very easy.
And bring a friend. I highly recommend that. All the shows where you have a friend with you, it's not only more interesting content usually and less scary, but it's really some good bonding time for you and your friends. That's a great way to hang out with your friends is to do radio
Be on the
with
radio,
them.
yeah.
Well,
We
not
have-
only that, but you'd be watching different aspects of the show, trying to, handle the equipment, and it's not all on you necessarily.
Yeah.
And
if something
I-
goes wrong, someone can vamp for a little bit while you run and get the door or whatever.
Yeah, we have a very young DJ on Sunday morning, Shelby, who's I think 14, and her dad comes in and sits with her on the show, just kind of make sure everything is going right. Just probably to drive her there too.
Yeah, right. I think it's mainly the driver there.
Yes. Book club with a 12-year-old.
Oh yeah. No, Elijah's 13.
They're 13 now? Okay.
Yeah, actually tomorrow at 3:00, Epilogue is the name of the show, and it's a 13-year-old.
So that'd be Sundays at 3.
Sundays at 3.
Yeah.
Yes, tomorrow.
Because this
The-
gets
Well,
aired
this gets
at different
every
days.
time, so it could be any day.
Right. So
It's the
right.
fourth,
Okay.
fourth Sunday.
Fourth Sunday. So there you go. It's happening.
Fourth Sunday of the month, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that actually we've heard from people who've been at other community radio stations is we are a lot more diverse as a group of DJs than most stations, which is an awesome thing. It's not there's kind of a what's the stereotype? The gray ponytail.
Oh right.
Kind
right.
of the '60s kind of
stoner type.
sentimentality, yeah. You know,
The
we
old
have
hippie from the 60s.
orchestra
Yeah.
conductors, business owners, you know, students of various ages.
Yeah, Willamette University has a group of
Willamette
students.
University, great
And
presence.
this is
Yeah.
my first experience in a community station, but I've talked to people that have been in others, and apparently we seem to all get along really well. And that's not the case in a lot of community radio stations.
Really?
There seems to be, especially there's entrenched, you know, I don't want to get into that, but we love it that we all get along so well. Very rarely do we have issues, and if we do, they're fairly minor, we address them straight away. So, but generally speaking, we have a great bunch of folks that are at the station that do programming on a regular basis for our community.
I think anyone who's tried to do something kind of a little interesting and non-pedestrian in Salem, sometimes they run into that wall where it's hard to get enough creative, participatory people in one place to do something like this. So you get a place like KMUZ, and it's the focus of all these amazing people that just don't have an outlet anywhere else. I think that's part of it. There's not very much competition for these amazing people's time.
I remember, I won't name names,
No, okay.
but early on we'd asked a couple of people in the community to help us out with donations and stuff, and we were told, "Oh, you'll never make it."
Oh,
You know, and
but you're
Nothing goes
your
in
second
Salem.
birthday already.
Nothing goes. Nothing goes in Salem.
Yeah, and so we said, no, we're going to make it, and we've proven, you know, 2 years plus on, we're still here and we're growing. So we like to point to that sometimes.
Well, you know, I've often thought that there isn't a place for the community quite often to talk, and that's something that's quite often missing.
Yeah.
And I remember doing a television show where I was doing the answering the phone for people calling in, and this lady didn't agree with anything the guest or the host were saying. And I stopped her and I said, "Well, since you don't seem to agree with anything, why are you watching?" And
Yeah.
she says, "Well, you're the best thing on." and this was prime time,
Yeah.
Monday night during football season. But I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's a real need in the community to have conversations about important topics.
Something sincere.
Yes, and I think that comes across on KMUZ.
I think what really comes across to me is that these people really care about the Mid-Willamette Valley, and we'd love to keep expanding and getting hosts from Albany and Staten and Monmouth and Independence. We have a couple, but we'd love to get more because that's all part of our reach.
Now, being trained DJs, we're keeping an eye on our clock here.
Yes.
So.
Well,
40
it-
seconds.
Well,
We're counting
yes, that's
down.
important. But, you know, the thing is that I want to encourage people to listen to KMUZ,
Yeah, thank you.
88.5,
FM.
Or online at
KMUZ.org.
KMUZ.org.
Because I do think there's a lot of interesting programming, a lot of interesting music going on in that station. It's one of the reasons why I invited you all.
Yeah, thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thank
Well,
you.
it's nice listening to KMUZ.
Yeah.
And because it is the voice of the community. And so I want to thank you for watching this week, and come back next week when we'll be discussing something new.